Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and today we have to talk about education apps that your children may be using thanks to their schools, because a lot of them are selling your kids' data to third parties as well as tracking them. This is nuts. Now this is coming, I'm cribbing primarily from Gizmodo, but this is actually coming from a rather detailed and immense report that was released this past Tuesday by the nonprofit advocacy group known as Human Rights Watch, or HRW, which says that in 49 countries where it studied, 146 of the 164 ed tech products, that's educational technology products, that governments sometimes recommended, engaged in harvesting or otherwise monitoring your child's activity. That is nuts. Now, these platforms use tracker technology that monitor their activities outside of the classroom, oftentimes tracking their whereabouts, identifying their friends and family, and otherwise harvesting data that they sold to advertising companies. Now, this report, according to lead researcher Hee-Jun Han, focused on apps or sites working on Google Android, where researchers downloaded the products and created user accounts when necessary in order to track how their data was being used. Basically, Android, if you didn't know this, and my fellow nerds out there will understand, Android lends itself to a lot more of a deeper inspection because it's a much more open operating system than Apple. But please understand that if it's tracking on Android, it's tracking on Apple as well. Now, the report notes that programs like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Cisco WebEx, etc., were basically variously used around the world for remote classwork by, in this particular case, as they were studying this, we'll get to that, districts in California and Texas, despite them not being explicitly designed for children's use. Some of those programs are known for tracking user data. Zoom, for example, has had its feet held to the fire, basically over face reading artificial intelligence tech for students as well. Basically, Zoom was reading their face, your face. Zoom is a hot mess of privacy. My clients that have the most sensitive of information, or rather discussions, never touch Zoom with a 10-foot pole. But other programs that were advertised specifically for kids' use basically had this issue. Now, Texas, the state of Texas, used a website known as ST Math, which HRW researchers said used key logging tracking technology to send children's data to third-party companies, including Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Spotify. Now, the trackers were not only found on the site's homepage, but also on the pages of where they were offering math games for pre-kindergartners and first graders, meaning as your pre-kindergartner or first grader was essentially going down to play a math game, whatever it was, they were actually using trackers to get that kind of information. Now, the report further noted that Texas school districts use education programs like Schoology and Seesaw that embedded software development kits on the students' devices, which could then be used to track data for the sake of advertising. Facebook, for example, as well as Google, have SDKs or software development kits that developers can integrate into their apps because it is a profit center for them, and here we are. Now, the Washington Post, on an aside, reported that PowerSchool, which basically developed Schoology, denied that it was tracking students, referencing the company's privacy policy, though the company does use third-party tools to show targeted ads, aka software development kit. So, here we go. Some researchers and teachers were basically blowing the data privacy whistle long before this report was released. Hello, nice to meet you. I've been talking about these kinds of things for years. Researchers quoted a Texas algebra teacher, though, named Abby Rufer, who told them that she was concerned that 60 to 70% of her students had a family member either deported or were in custody of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, making it an unacceptable and dangerous situation to put these kids in. Meaning, if these kids are linking together who is related to who by virtue of having hooks into a mobile device that is personally owned, let's say by the child or the child's family, that is of deep concern, especially if it's reading other things. Now, this isn't nearly the first time that these companies have come under fire for harvesting data from users. Basically, everybody from TikTok, which is absolutely huge, not to mention I've done a ton on Facebook, even small developers. Interestingly enough, the one that is mentioned is one I actually talked about, which was a Muslim prayer app that was apparently taking that information on who was using that app and sending it to the government. So obviously, tracking user data is a huge thing. But in EdTech's case, HRW said that their products pieced together data that they got from children, quote, to deduce each child's characteristics, behaviors, and interests for the sake of advertising. So let's say Junior is, and I don't know, I haven't been a kid in years, into G.I. Joes or Transformers or My Little Pony, whatever is popular today. Essentially, these ed tech apps could start getting those characteristics, that information, and start pumping out, I don't know, G.I. Joe advertisements, or, again, whatever's popular today, probably video games. There you go. Now, the advocacy group analyzed these products between March and August of last year, and so they acknowledged that it's possible that some of the practices for some of these apps may have changed in the years since. Probably not unless they're caught, but here we are. Now, some companies denied they were tracking children's data or claimed they were not intended for use by children. I can understand that for like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all that, but Google actually focuses on education. What's their excuse? Now, some school districts defended the use of these products, saying that the study included home pages for these products compared to the program pages that contained less trackers. Obviously, there's a huge issue with that, though, and we'll get to that in a second, because researchers rebutted that in order to access the programs, you got to go through the homepage first. Yeah, if I'm logging into a site, they're tracking me right out of the gate. And if I'm further into the site, let's say into a portal in a protected, non-searchable area on a Google, I'm still being tracked because I've got to go to the homepage to get in. Absolutely nuts. Now, Human Rights Watch also put the onus on governments for promoting software to schools, quote, that handle children's personal data in ways that risked or infringed on their rights, end quote, by making that use compulsory, meaning your school district decides to use PowerSchool or one of those products out there, and suddenly, you've got a huge problem as well. I mean, I've heard of some of these. Seesaw is one that I've heard of as well when we're talking about these things. So that obviously is a huge problem as we are using these apps on our platforms. We have something here in the United States known as the COPPA, or the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, that is supposed to give parents more agency over essentially how our children are being tracked, but quite frankly, it's really antiquated at this point. The world has evolved way beyond when COPPA was created, and so hopefully we're going to have something better here. But to be clear, the United States lags behind on privacy protections. We are behind the European Union and other first world nations, and that obviously is a huge problem. Even Canada's got better privacy than we do, and we enshrine it into our constitution. But obviously, when the constitution was created, the microprocessor, let alone the internet, was never in existence or even in a dream. So obviously, it's a huge problem. We're going to see where this goes, but understand that as your kids are using these apps as recommended or required by your school district, they're being data mined. And I think that's something that, quite frankly, you should have a conversation with things like your local school board in a nice, calm manner. Please, no death threats over this, like school boards have been getting death threats over mask mandates, for God's sakes. Please be civil to each other, but we still have to have this conversation. And so that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everyone.